friends, it's Michelle Ladd, National Veteran Resources, and today I have the honor of introducing you to my friend Chris, and Chris is a retired Navy Chief Petty Officer.
That's right.
20 years, guys, and Chris and I have known each other for a while now, and we've been kind of following each other and encouraging each other in our different everyday things that we do, and so in San Antonio, I told him I'd like to come and visit him and interview with him, and he's a very interesting character. And
Thanks.
You're welcome. And so I always talk to my veterans about what is it that we can say to give a message to you, and he has a really interesting job, and I've also asked him, well, Chris, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your services to our country. I always like to start with that.
Oh, thank you for having me on here.
You're welcome. And so I just want to ask you, after serving 20 years of your life in the Navy, what was it like to get out in that transition for you? Everybody's had a different experience.
Yeah.
What was yours like?
I was fortunate enough to be in the intelligence community, information warfare, and cyber threats, cyber intelligence. So my job transitioned very easily into the civilian world. And I know that there's a lot of situations where jobs may not transition, and you may need to switch career fields or maybe start your own business. And we go to a transitioning class called GPS. And in that class, they teach us how to write resumes, they teach us how to interview, and they teach us, if we want to like open a small business, how to go about that and stuff like that. So they try to help you transition so you're not a homeless vet, needing serious help. Because, years ago, that was the thing. There's a lot of homeless veterans out there, unfortunately, and it still happens today because no one has a plan when they transition, just like you were mentioning. So when I transitioned in June of 2016, and immediately got a job as a contractor, and I did a contract work for like 3 months. That's all they needed me for. And after that, I took some time off to enjoy retirement. I enjoyed that. Not having to report to work every day and enjoying life for a little while. So, yeah, my transition was a lot different because, believe it or not, I was set up in the Navy as a cryptologic technician, networks chief. Jobs were available. In fact, I didn't even have to interview. I just knew somebody, and they were like, bam, you're hired. I was very fortunate.
That's so good. Hey, Eric. Hey, Randy. We've got some people giving us the kudos.
Oh, that's great.
Eric, I am going to see you soon, and I hope you're going to get on camera with me. I'm going to see Eric in the Dallas area.
Oh, nice.
Randy. Hey, Randy. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the cyber.
Yes.
Okay, let's start there.
Okay. So as I said, I'm a cyber analyst. I worked from 2004 to 2016 in the computer network defense realm of the United States Navy. And I wanted to get this platform to talk about the information warfare aspect of war. Because, yes, I did go to Afghanistan, and I did help secure networks all over that area of responsibility. But I wasn't necessarily hand-to-hand combat or boots on the ground. We were behind the scenes doing the research necessary and the targeting necessary to help the warfighter, because without the intelligence and without the information warfare, we help keep them alive, out on the front lines. So I definitely wanted to give a shout out to everybody out there that's behind the scenes as well, because I'll tell you, we do a lot of work to help the warfighter. And the way that things are going with emerging technologies, war is going to be won and lost within this realm, within the battlefield of cyber.
you've talked and you've been very involved in your career
Absolutely.
as that, and
lot of cyber network defense on ships, on Department of Defense entities, three-letter agencies that I won't mention. And yeah, I've gotten the chance to help defend networks on aircraft carriers, destroyers, cruisers, doing exercises with the crew. They call them infocon drills, which are different levels of threat, right? So if let's say, for instance, another country was attacking our networks, we would go to this level and try to enhance our security. The hard part there was it was a lot of reactive rather than being proactive.
so that's so interesting. He was sharing with me a little bit before we did this interview, and I'm quite amazed by what he does. So we've talked a lot about what my mission is,
Yes.
and PTSD and suicide awareness and prevention. And as I travel the country, I'm reaching out to all these organizations, but I'm also interviewing those that have seen so much and know so much, and our veterans and our first responders. And so Chris has actually had experience in suicide prevention, so I would like for you to say what you did, and you had a couple of stories that maybe we could just inspire people to get the help.
Absolutely. When I was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia, and I just made Chief Petty Officer, and one of the collateral duties that was open was Suicide Prevention Coordinator for the command. You in turn work with the Suicide Prevention Coordinator of the region, and then all the chaplains in the different hospitals and doctors' offices and whatnot. So taking on this job, we had to do a lot of training, and we did a lot of training annually for suicide prevention as well throughout my entire career. But this was specific to being the coordinator of a command. We realized that everybody is a first responder, not just EMS and paramedics, right? It is everybody's mission to help each other out. I was telling Michelle earlier, a situation where, let's say, Petty Officer Johnson's walking down the hallway and he's got his head down and you can tell something's wrong with him. Like, don't walk right past him, ask him how he's doing today, and just simply that, and he may say, I need to talk to you, or, I'm in trouble. Who knows what would happen. One of the things we were taught in the service was, as a first responder, to ask the question, are you okay, or do you plan to harm yourself or others? And then care, right? Get the necessary care, and there's so many resources, and Michelle can elaborate more on a lot of those resources that are out there. And then treat, right? So make sure that the person is receiving the proper treatment so that their mental health can be restored, or at least they can believe more in themselves, and that they have a purpose in life. I had two situations happen while I was in the service with suicide. I was very fortunate. I saw a lot of different commands that sailors would commit suicide, and we didn't have that happen in my commands. But when I was in Diego Garcia in the year 2000, I had a young, whippersnapper kid, full of energy. He's a great kid, and we talked about how on this island the girl to guy ratio was about 15 to 1, 15 girls to 1 guy. So the girls had their choice of guys that they wanted to date, and he was wanting to find a girlfriend, and it was a struggle on this island. And I was his supervisor, and we were very slow that night, and I sent him back to his room and said, enjoy the night off, but you're still on duty, so don't drink, was my message to him. Found out that he had drank a whole bottle of, I think it was like Jim Beam or something, and he punched his window, or his mirror, and he broke his hand, and then he turned around and he slit his wrists. He slit his wrists sideways. I know that the way to kill yourself is
don't tell him
some other way. Anyhow, I got home from watch that morning, and I got a call saying that he was definitely in the hospital, and I couldn't believe it when I went and saw him, and I was like, why didn't you just talk to me? You know, like, you asked me how to get a girlfriend. Why couldn't you just talk to me? And, you know, it's a successful story because they sent him to Japan for inpatient treatment for alcoholism, and also, you know, suicide watch. But then he wound up, years later, I wound up seeing him when he had joined the Coast Guard. So it was a successful story, you know. Thank God he didn't harm himself or anybody else. The other situation I had is I had a sailor kind of flip out in the office, and I pulled him aside and I asked him what his deal was, and he told me that, you know, he's the one that's doing all the work in the shop and nobody's doing anything, and he's getting all frustrated, and I could see it in his eyes that something was really wrong, and I switched hats and I said, okay, now I'm going to talk to you as the suicide prevention coordinator of the command. And I asked him, I had to ask that hard question, just like I said, ask that question. And I asked him if he was planning on harming himself, and he kind of looked at me and said, well, I think I will, you know. And I was like, okay. And I made sure that he wasn't alone, because that's another thing. Like, if you are a first responder, stay with the person, right? Don't leave them alone, and give them any kind of opportunity. You know, be there and talk to them and listen to their story. So that's what we did. Someone else had gotten on the phone with a chaplain, and I asked him if he wanted to talk to a chaplain, because that's one of our resources in the service, is the chaplains and the hospitals, right? The psychiatrists that are available. The chaplain said, bring him to Portsmouth Hospital, and we did. And we met the chaplain there, and he wound up getting a psychiatric evaluation. That they released him that night into my care, and I see now that he's married with a kid, and, you know, another success story. But the fact is like, who knows what could have happened had I not asked him those questions in that room. You know, it could have been that evening that he had enough, you know. And life will throw us curveballs, and we have to be able to deal with those in a constructive and productive way. You know, otherwise, we do become, you know, depressed and suicidal. It's part of, I don't know, it's part of the human nature, I believe. And I'm going to have a sip of Pepsi.
while I talk.
Yep.
So, I am a mom of 2 veterans. One of them is a combat veteran. I can only imagine some of the things that he dealt with. Over the years, it's been over 8 years, I've been working with military and veterans and first responders, and they've shared their stories. That's where this passion of mine comes from. Now I am on a mission to fight PTSD and suicide prevention, suicide awareness, and get resources out there. So interviewing my hero like Chris that can share his experience and give some advice on these issues is very, very helpful. I'm traveling the country reaching out to organizations that help our veterans and help our first responders. So I've been to, around the country already, I've been to at least 10, and I have many on my radar that I'm going to be reaching out to. I'm going to share all those resources on nationalveteranresources.com. Eric, I'm sorry, I see that you're writing something very important, and we were in the middle of a conversation, so what I'm going to do is talk with Chris afterwards, and know that we'll get back to you, and I'm going to see you in a couple of days. And so, is there anything else you want to share about your experience in the military that affected your life in a negative or a positive way?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
When I joined the service, you know, I was young and full of energy and was a partier. Stayed in that mode for a long, long time. You know, started off drinking socially, and then it got to the point where depression set in, and I was very depressed. And then, you know, I had a couple of what I like to call now is like messages from something greater than myself. But I didn't listen to those messages because I was a stubborn sailor. And, you know, it took me a long time to realize that I needed to change in my life. And, you know, I found some resources that there is solutions to alcoholism. You don't have to be alone. You know, a lot of people drink alone in private in their rooms, and they feel alone. There are resources out there that will help you and guide you, right, so that you aren't alone. And I don't feel alone at all today, you know, compared to where I was. When the incident happened to me where I hit my complete bottom, I was isolated in my bedroom, and I didn't know what was going to happen in my life. I wasn't suicidal, but I was so depressed that I didn't even want to get up and brush my teeth, you know, and I was at that point. And then, of course, you have to cover yourself, so I was lying, you know, to cover down excuses. And if you know, have a similar story, you know, there's definitely resources that we could talk about, you know, and if you reach out to Michelle, and, you know, a program that I'm in has just been absolutely amazing, and my life has completely changed. Barely have depression. I still have that clinical depression, but like I'm barely taking anything for it. It's more like,
I'm so glad to hear that.
yeah. Problems have vanished in my life, and my life is pretty damn good today, you know. And I don't drink at all. That's the only answer, you know. If you are an alcoholic or think you are an alcoholic, the only answer really is abstinence. But you know, you'll hear the cliches. It is one day at a time. But think about it. If you don't drink for 24 hours, and then you thank somebody for keeping you that for sober for 24 hours, those days pile up. You know, every single day piles up. And you know, there's a sign where I go and it says expect a miracle, and to me it's like I am a miracle, you know, of just it's an amazing success, and I want to continue down this road. Like, I want more and more and more of that rather than alcohol. So.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
You look great. You sound great.
Thanks.
We started talking last year, and he helped me realize a lot of things too. And so I had to come to San Antonio and meet him, and now that I'm here again, I had to see him again. And thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Oh, I'm glad to be here, and I want to thank all the active duty servicemen and women, obviously, and also all the veterans and anybody, you know, that is first responders, firefighters, all this. Like, this is an amazing ministry that Michelle has taken on, and I hope that, you know, these messages will be heard, and if we can save just one life, you know, from maybe a dark, dreary place, like, you know, they're drinking themselves to death or drugging themselves to death, maybe this message can get out to them and say, you know what, there's hope, because that's what I needed. I needed hope, and I got hope. So.
Oh my God, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So, Chris's message, get help. I posted earlier that I'm interviewing Chris, but I'm going to share with you right now that I am with a widow. I'm staying in her home, and she has agreed to share her story, and her husband served over 20 years, and 6 years ago, he couldn't handle his PTSD or depression any longer, and he committed suicide. And she is left still 6 years later with questions and a lot of issues that still come along. And I'm not going to say much more because I want her to talk about her experience. I want her to tell her story. Be prepared. It's going to be a very emotional interview But ultimately, I'm staying with a woman who lost her husband to suicide, and we want to prevent that from happening. So if you guys please share my interviews. Please share Chris's story. Please share this on your Facebook pages and on all your social media, and pay attention to your friends and loved ones that have served our country and our communities, because you just don't know. So please watch tonight. I'm not exactly sure what time. When I know what time, if you want to watch it live, but remember, I always post these so you can watch it later. And please share our messages. It's so important. And thank you again, Chris.
Oh, you're welcome.
We are melting. We're in the RV with no AC in Texas. It's like 92 degrees. I have all the windows open.
I'm finally getting used to it after being here for 7 years now. I'm finally starting to get used to the sweat and the redness in your face when it gets hot.
Yeah, my dog, I don't even know where. She's probably hiding somewhere. It's so hot in here. So please watch my interview tonight. Please share all of my interviews, and I thank you all so much for your services to our country and our community, and God bless the loved ones that love our veterans and military and first responders. It's a tough job.
Thanks for what you do too.
Thank you.
You're
Feel
welcome.
so much. God bless everybody. Take care. Thanks, Chris.
Yep.